It is a great pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to thank ICAS for hosting this very important seminar. I mentioned just now that timing cannot be better because it really dovetails with the big event in Beijing. Now, 10 years ago, if the United States stayed away from BRI, it stayed away from a concept. Today, when the United States continues to stay away, it is staying away from a gathering of 153 countries. So if anyone here thinks it's not a big loss for the United States, tell me, and I would like to argue with you. Now, there are so many things about China-US relations we can talk about. And China-US relations is such that everyone knows a little bit about, no one knows the totality about it, and it keeps changing. So when I'm thinking about this China-US relations, I think I just want to share with you my views on one thing at the very, very top. You know, there is a very distinguished American scholar who wrote a book about Destined for War and tries to apply that conclusion to Thucydides' trap theory to China-US relations, meaning China and the United States are destined for war. I felt uncomfortable with that book ever since I read the book review. And I spent quite a few years to figure out whether there was something wrong with that theory when applied to China-US relations. I now realized, and I'm convinced, it's a fallacy if anyone wants to apply that to China-US relations. Now, I say this with due respect to the professor himself, to the school he is from, and to the university in Boston. I came from New Haven, so don't be surprised if people from New Haven sometimes talk about that bigger university in Boston negatively. But I do believe it is a fallacy. Why? Because the professor analyzed all the cases of war and came up with this theory. But he forgets that all the cases of war he analyzed are wars in conventional war, whereas China and the United States are not only two conventional powers, but more importantly, two of the most important nuclear powers. So there is something missing. You cannot apply conclusion you scientifically arrived at, analyzing conventional wars, and apply the conclusion thereof to two nuclear powers. That leads me to my own theory, if any. It's called the inevitability of peace between China and the United States. Why? People here in the United States say there are two things inevitable. Inevitable to die, probably except Elon Musk or his followers, and inevitability to pay tax. Uncle Sam is getting after you if you refuse to pay tax. Now I added another one. That is the inevitability of peace. Inevitability of peace doesn't mean we need to love each other, but it requires to respect each other and to live and let live. That means I want to live, I need to let you live, and you need to live, and you need to let me live. See, it's very even-handed. And inevitability of peace cannot be achieved without each side accumulating enough strength so neither side will really wrongly second-guess each other and jump the gun in the wrong direction. Therefore, I do believe the future of China-US relations is based on inevitability of peace. And I would like to debate with that professor in that bigger university in Boston to see whether any one of us would agree that there is a fallacy in that destined for war policy applied to China and the United States. And I would consider that fallacy as a poisoning effect on China-US relations, including Professor Swing, who just now mentioned about this tendency of talking about war, either involving Taiwan or otherwise between China and the United States. Allow me to mention one thing. War between China and the United States will be real Armageddon for both China and the United States and for human sapient species. So I would like to urge all of us to do the right thing, that is to promote peace, rather than insanely agitate for war between China and the United States. Now, based on this inevitability of peace, because there are so many problems in China-US relations, what should we do? I think the United States government has characterized China-US relations as cooperation, competition, and confrontation. I would like to ask all of us, what do China and the United States compete for? What do we compete for? Do we compete in men's basketball or diving, especially women's diving, or table tennis, for example? No. We have, each of us, our own strengths and weaknesses, and China and the United States are two countries so different that you should never expect that China should be exactly the same like the United States, or the United States exactly the same as China. And no one here in Washington should really expect that China wants to impose our system or ideology or way of life onto the United States. That means eventually the only right thing between China and the United States is, allow me to mention, your God for you and my God for me. If China wants to impose its God, whatever it's defined, onto the United States, it's a war between China and the United States, because no one in the United States wants to live under a Chinese God. Likewise, if the United States wants to impose your God, whatever you define it, onto China, it will backfire. So, your God for you, my God for me, I want to live, you want to live, I want to let you live, and you won't let me live. That is the only right thing. And this will lead to what? The only right way between China and the United States. That is the inevitability of peace.